Now, with these two shots you're seeing here, one is with slow hips in transition and the other is with fast hips in transition. What one do you think is the straighter and longer shot? So, like a lot of you may have guessed there, it is actually the slower one, because the faster one, even though that makes sense, moving your hips faster, generating more club head speed, sure, if you're rotating them at the right time and doing it properly. But what we generally see when a player slows down their hips in transition, they really get the sequencing and the hip movement absolutely spot on, to where then they just gradually ramp up the speed. Where when players have their hips move as fast as they can in transition, you will see them overly fire the right side or trail side of their hip, which then completely throws them out of sequence, gets them stuck, makes them flip, really inconsistent, like the shot you could see there. So let me hit one here. Slow hips. I'm just trying to feel nice and slow with those hips. It's a little bit more that I'm doing here that I'm going to talk about in the video, but let's have a look at this. So really nice shot there. Very happy with that. So we can see just about in the 160s, which is an 8 iron. Absolutely just a tiny draw off the line, but very workable. If that was on the green, you know, if that was going to a flag, sorry, that would be nicely, you know, just a little bit left of it. Awesome. So let me do one here where I am going a lot faster with those hips in transition. Well, a lot of you tried to do. So I'm really going to try and fire it as hard as I can. Felt quicker, but it absolutely was not. Good amount of club head speed lower. Really bad strike, ball has been missed quite a bit left. So let's dive into this a little bit deeper here. Why do the slower hips in transition and the downswing work so much better than the faster ones? So let's understand it, get into the details other than it just helping sequencing like we discussed, and then I'll give you a really good drill to be able to get this into your swing. So when I slow down those hips in transition, it massively promotes me to move the hips in an ideal fashion. So what this is the hips sinking backwards. So when we go into that downswing, that left hip sinks backwards. Look at all these top tour players here doing some exaggerations. Tiger, for example. Look at him. What's he doing there? He's getting that, what we would call squatting move. Now, the squatting move is that left hip going backwards. That gets that upper body flexing down, just like Tiger is exaggerating. And that is the key to getting good hip rotation that not only keeps the club out in front, hip rotation when a lot of players assume it gets the club stuck behind, only the bad, which we'll talk about, but then that helps you continue to turn through there. And because that left hip going back when I naturally slow that hip turn down, it will also help me squat and then release the squat out of the ground. So when I get that left hip lowering, I then, if I keep having from that slow hips, that left hip being pushed back, which is more incentivized when we do it slower, the pushing back more and more and more extends the left side as we go through the shot. And then that gets that squat back out the ground again. That's where we get the power from the squat. So that's so important, not only for just getting that lower body to lead, slower hips will get that lower body to lead, give you time, which is so important to start that downswing. And it also helps for that power generation from that squat, like we saw with Tiger really practicing there. So that's where when we get into the fast hips, where we really try to move those hips really quickly in transition, which is extremely hard to be able to time. Way left, as we can see there, and not that long. Ultimately, that is, for most golfers, right-handed golfers for this case, their right side is going to be the stronger side of their body. So if they're moving their hips first, what they're going to be doing, they're going to be, of course, moving the stronger side first, which is firing off with that right hip. It's instinctual movement if you want to go and explode with those hips. But if we try to explode with those hips from transition, what else happens from there? That stereotypical classical stuck happens. That's why opening the hips and clearing them does not make you stuck. Firing them really hard with the right side makes you stuck. So that's where, if that right side moves forward, I'm naturally, without doing anything to my arms, my right arm is going to get stuck behind my body. And then from there, early extension, flipping, even if I stay in posture and turn, shanking can happen. Again, I could hit so many shots with that fast hips and not hit a good shot again there. Really short, really left. So that's why we need to have time in that transition. We need to slow down that hip movement so we can have a better chance, again, that left hip back and then continue pushing it back for good sequencing and good extension going through the golf ball. Slow those hip movements down. Scratch out, slow everything down in transition. So let's slow it down. Ball immediately starts straighter, immediately goes a lot further without that much effort. So let's get straight into the drill here. So like we could see from the data, the slower hips absolutely goes longer and straighter. Even though it's slower hips, we would notice, even if we go back and watch the club head speed is faster, as we said, from the slower hip movement. But that's because the hips, even though they feel like they're moving slow, they're actually technically moving faster because they're moving in better sequence and better power movement going through the ball. So, okay, and if you wanted the exact same measurement system that I use, the same simulator, that is the FlightScope Mevo Plus with the Pro package. There is a link in the description to get 10% off our FlightScope on there, which is a great deal. Best launch monitor, portable launch monitor out there. It beats a load of the top range launch monitors. I personally think it is just as good as the very, very top ones, but for real small amount of the price of it. So, okay, drill wise, we want to stop this right hip from going forward because we need to slow it down. A lot of you golfers will be just driving that right hip forward. So straight away, we can do an easy one there. Just grab a club, preferably a wedge, put it underneath our heel. Now we have to be forced, if we want to keep this underneath our heel until after impact, we have to make sure we're moving those hips slower to be able to do that in transition. If we move them fast, it's immediately going to drop. So that's one thing I want you to do, but that's not all of it. I want you also to feel like you are moving backwards with your hips. Imagine that there is a chair just a little bit behind you and you want to sit down on that chair, but you're sitting down on that chair with your left side first. So you're sitting down on the chair behind you with your left side first, really exaggerate it. So just like we saw with those top players, try that exact same feel, but you are sitting down on a chair behind you. Now keep this underneath your foot, sit down on an imaginary chair, just a little bit behind you. And that is going to be a great feel to slow down those hips, but also to keep that right side at bay and hit some much, much better shots there. Brilliant. So what do we do after that? Rep out the drill. There is no substitute for really tons and tons of reps. You're only ever going to do the movement pattern you are most used to doing. So that means, of course, what have you got to do? A lot of the new movement pattern. So do a ton of this, stick a wedge underneath there, sit down on a bench behind you or a chair, really slow down those hips. And there we go. Again, awesome. This is the way to really reframe hip movement in a downswing and make sure you are ingraining the correct way to do it. It's such a misconception to move those hips faster in transition. We do want them moving faster, but like a lot of golf and a lot of golf technique, common sense is quite sometimes a little bit of an enemy when it comes to golf. And that's where slowing it down in this area will actually speed you up and get you straighter. Just like that. So if you enjoyed this video, click that like button. If you want more golf instruction just like this, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell button too to be notified every time I put out a video.